Hey everyone, today I'm out at Oakland Cemetery and I'm at the Jasper Newton Smith Mausoleum. This is the project that we're going to be working on for the terrestrial laser scanning assignment. So today what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the process of collecting field notes and field measurements. So this is where the field work comes in. Unfortunately, because of the current situation, we're not able to kind of do this together. Normally this would happen with the entire class, but since we're unable to get together, I figured that this would be the best way for you to kind of understand how it works with using the Faro scanner and collecting field measurements. So, as I mentioned, it's Jasper Newton Smith Mausoleum, and one of the things that you would want to do is, before coming out on site, is to do a little bit of reconnaissance research. So I just went to Google Maps or using Google Earth and to get an idea of how many scan locations. If you recall from the lecture, we need about 30% overlap between each one of these scan locations, because what you end up doing is you stitch these particular scans together. So let's go ahead and maybe talk a little bit about the Faro Focus. So this is the Faro Focus X130. It's the 130 model, so that means it scans up to a distance of 130 meters, so we're talking almost 400 feet. And if you remember from the lecture, this is a medium range scanner. It's also a phase-based scanner, so that means that it's collecting information by emitting a wave at a particular known wavelength. It hits an object and bounces back, and so the difference between the distance of the wavelength when it was emitted and then the distance of the wavelength when it comes back, that's how it is measuring and calculating the distance. I also talked about some earlier scanners that I had worked with, and you had seen some pictures where I was kind of tethered to a computer, external power source, additional memory that was required. But the nice thing about this is everything is on board. So I can interact with the scanner here through the interface. There's also a small SD storage card in here. And if I turn it around, this is the battery source, and the battery should last, I say, about 8 hours, more or less. The other thing that's pretty nice is that, there's, in addition to the laser scanner, there's a camera that's, built within here. So after it scans, it then takes color images that can be overlaid on top of one another at a later point. But essentially, this mirror will rotate. And then it's going to shoot the laser out, from the scanner, hits the mirror, hits the object, bounces back, and then that's how it's calculated. All right, so I mentioned it beforehand, thinking about scanner locations, and you want to do some reconnaissance ahead of time. That will give you an idea of how much time you will be spending on site. I've done enough of this to know that it takes about 20 minutes for each scan location. And so this one won't actually take very long at all, and I kind of figured out that I will need about 4 scan locations. But once I'm out on site, I do want to walk around and make sure if I'm going to be dealing with any obstructions and to kind of solidify my choice of scan locations. But I'm kind of just starting out now, and I make like a real crude sketch that once I get back in the lab and I'm processing this data, I can use it to assist with how I'm going to register my scans together. Again, this one's a really small project, so that's not, it's sort of not necessary. On larger projects, it's a lot more helpful, but it's just good to get in the habit of keeping good field notes. So I started out with just kind of indicating where my scan location is in reference to the building, and I include a scan 1 and 2. And 1 is a preview scan, and the next one will be like a full quarter resolution scan. And I'll go into what that means here real quickly. So one of the first things that I do is, after I've chosen the scan location and I've set up the scanner, I do what's called a preview scan, and that's just a really quick scan. So it'll collect about 2.8 million points in a little over a minute. But that's very low resolution and isn't anywhere near the quality that we would want to document a historic building. I also mentioned before the quarter resolution, so that's what we're really shooting for, which means 1 out of every 4 possible points is being collected. And when we have it at that setting, we're talking about 40 million points in more or less about 10 minutes. But what I do is I go ahead and I create a preview scan, which spins a full 360, so it's collecting information 360 degrees horizontal, 270 vertical, and then what I can do is I can go and use that as a way of narrowing my focus. So I do a preview scan, I look on the scanner, and then I kind of narrow in the field of view and take a higher resolution scan. And what this does is, one, it if I'm not interested in any of this information behind me, it automatically excludes that. So I'm not kind of dealing with erroneous data or unnecessary data. And then additionally, what it does is it reduces my amount of time on site, because a quarter resolution scan, full 360 is, like I said, about 10-11 minutes. But if I kind of just narrow the focus, I can scan in probably about 6 or 7 minutes. Okay, so real quickly, I'm just going to go through how you would set up a preview scan. And the nice thing is there's some settings that are already done. So we've got some different profiles, and I'm going to go to this preview profile. So you can see that's selected here. And then if I look at the resolution and quality, what I was talking about earlier, you can see that it's going to collect about 2.7 million points, and it's going to happen in 1.5 minutes, and it's going to be a full 360. It will also not be taking photographs at this point, because we just want this as the preview that we can then begin to narrow focus on our area of interest. So once I've got that set, it's fine. I can hit the home button, and then I can start the scan. And this, like I said, this is just something that'll be really quick and give you an idea of how it works. One of the things that you'll notice is that as it's spinning 360, you will also see the mirror spinning. And the mirror is spinning really fast, and that's because, again, it's a preview, and you're getting lower resolution, a lower number of points. When we do a higher resolution scan, the the mirror will spin at a much lower revolution. Okay, now you can see what we captured, and this is what I'm going to use as a reference, and I can begin to narrow the focus. So I'm going to go back to parameters, and for selected profile, I'm going to change it to this particular setting that's outdoor 20, and that's already been set up at a quarter resolution. So if we kind of look here, you can see now at a quarter resolution, which is 1 out of every 4 possible points that we will be collecting, it's going to take about 11.5 minutes, and we'll get approximately 44 million points. We will also be taking color photographs at this time too. So if I go back to parameters, this is where I can adjust the horizontal and vertical. So in this area, again, this is where I kind of narrow in the focus, and I can go ahead and push this button here so that I'm excluding everything to the right, and I just want to kind of focus in on the building. So now I've narrowed in on the building. I can go back to my parameters, and what you see now we look at resolution and quality, we're still at a quarter resolution, but now we've reduced our time. Now we're down to 5 minutes and 16 seconds, and we're talking about approximately 11 million points. So you can kind of see here how much time we're saving for each scan location, and then possibly not collecting information that we won't need. So that's something just to consider. And then I can go home and start scan, and we won't do the full scan, but just enough for you to see how much slower the mirror is rotating when compared to the preview. Alright, so as I mentioned, there are going to be about 4 scan locations in total, and this is the final field note that I created showing the 4 different scan locations. And as you can see, it alternates between preview and quarter resolution. 4 was enough for this just because of how small the building is, and the fact that I was able to get on the corners, was able to cover enough of both sides of the building at each scan location. For bigger buildings, you're going to need to do more than the 4 corners, and obviously, definitely in the middle of the structure. But because of how small this one is, 4 scans were enough. And so these were the different scan locations that were chosen. So I'll kind of just go through the locations real quick so you can kind of see where I was scanning from. And then at each site or each location, again, it was first I completed the preview scan, did the 360, and then was able to narrow the focus. And on average, they were more or less the same at each location in terms of the amount of time. So more or less about 5 to 6 minutes at each location. I think all in all, it was probably around, 40 minutes of time on site, and that's really about picking up the scanner, moving it, preview scanning, doing the quarter resolution scan, and then going to the next location. So I hope this was a pretty good overview for you. And the next steps, what we'll do is the next video will involve processing this information back in the computer lab.